Can we go ahead? Can we begin? Okay. All right. Well, welcome back. I love this. Half of us are gone. It's all right though. We'll- we're going to keep going. So, we're going to talk. We just talked about diabetes. Hopefully, you learned some really good tips that you can use when you go home to help reverse and control blood sugar. Well, we're going to talk about another one of those diseases that is really very prevalent. Sometimes, like Shanice began her presentation as well, sometimes we begin these presentations by uh, listing to you all these different statistics. But almost everyone in this room has been affected either by diabetes or cancer. Either you yourself, you know someone who's had it, a loved one, a friend, so you know that it is a prevalent disease. And so this is why some of these presentations are so very helpful. So today we're going to talk about cancer. We began already with prayer, but I'm just going to say a short prayer to begin. Heavenly Father, I pray that as we go through all of the information, you will bring home to our minds what is most important that we can do when we go home and share with others. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. All right. So it's a lot of information we're going to try to cover, but we're going to try to do it in a simple way and give you some great tips that you can use at home. So to begin, what is the definition of disease? Okay, half of my class is gone. We'll start here and then we'll come over here. Does anybody know what is the inspired definition of disease from the Spirit of Prophecy? Anybody? That's a good one. Yes. Sin, he said. Okay, students. I did it there. Okay, what's the definition of disease? An effort of nature to free the system from conditions that result from a violation of the laws of health. So, disease is really just a signal that tells us something went wrong, some law has been violated, right? And this quotation goes on to say, so it tells us first what the definition of disease is, but then it tells us how to treat disease. First, what must we do? The cause of the sickness, or in the case of sickness, the cause should be ascertained, unhealthful conditions should be changed, wrong habits corrected, and then nature is to be assisted in her effort to expel impurities and re-establish right conditions in the system. Okay, so sometimes we jump to that last part, the assisting nature part. We put the supplement in, we may do the hydrotherapy, but that's actually the last step. The first step in disease reversal is to address the cause, change unhealthful habits or unhealthful conditions and wrong habits. We learned about some of those wrong habits this morning in our 8 laws. Then nature is to be assisted. All right, so let's look at how we can apply some of these principles in the case of cancer. So cancer is a collection of related diseases. It's actually a bunch of diseases that are similar to each other. And in all types of cancers, some of the body cells begin to divide without stopping and spread into the surrounding tissue. So that's kind of like the basic definition of what cancer is. Something goes wrong in the cell, as you can see, right? Yeah, on that in that picture, you have the normal cell line up above, and then there's some change, right, within the cell that takes place, and that abnormal cell now begins to divide, begins to grow. You see that it's even changing color here because it's mutating even more, taking over more territory, and down below you see that it can even begins to break off and spread to other parts of the body. So basic definition of cancer: these cells begin to divide without stopping, and then they spread into the surrounding tissue. So cancer can really start anywhere in the body, because if you think of it, if it's starting at the cellular level, well, we have trillions of cells in our body, right? So really, cancer can begin anywhere. And you have, right, you've heard of, oh man, the common ones: breast cancer, colon cancer, ovarian, prostate, those types of things. But then you hear about the rare, right, types of ones in the brain, But anywhere in the body where there are cells, which is all over your body, you can have cancer development. In normal cells, they grow, they divide, and then they die when it is time. That's actually the natural, normal functioning of the cell, right? We call that programmed cell death. We we call that, yes, apoptosis, right? So in Ecclesiastes, we're told that there's a time to be born and there's a time to die, and that's the natural functioning of the cell. But guess what? In cancer, this order breaks down. So now cells survive when they should die. Abnormal cells that are, as we looked at in our first picture, cells that are really dangerous begin to live on when they should die, and then new cells form that are not needed, and the cells begin to divide without stopping. So that, remember the definition of disease, a violation of what? Law, right? So cancer, that's literally what cancer is. The law of the cell, the natural functioning of the cell is broken, causing disease. All right? Okay, so sometimes we think that cancer is such a fast growing thing because maybe that most times that's been our experience. You've heard somebody got cancer and then maybe 2 weeks later they're in the hospital or they've died or something like that. But when we actually look at it in certain cell lines, in certain cancer cell lines, it actually does not grow as fast as we think it does. Here you have an example of the precursor cell to the blood cell, so the stem cell that creates red blood cell. One human myeloid progenitor cell, that's the name of the stem cell, in 7 days creates about 10,000 daughter cells. So one cell, 7 days, 10,000 daughter cells. That's the normal functioning cell. Versus the leukemia cell, which is, I guess, on this side of your screen. One leukemia cell, leukemia is a blood cancer, so it's along the same type of cell line, only creates about 2 to 3 daughter cells within the same period of time. But even though it doesn't divide as quickly as the normal cell, what happens in normal cells don't happen in cancer. So as we've been mentioning before, and you'll hear me say it over and over, in normal cells we have these signals that tell the cell when to die, right? Actually, the cell begins to divide, and then the surrounding cells around it give off these inhibitory or negative signals that tell it, listen, you're getting too big. It's actually time to start slowing down your development, or your stop multiplying. Well, in cancer, this breaks down. This it doesn't respond to these signals. So even though the cancer is growing slowly, it is persistent, or it's consistent, like the bunny and the turtle, tortoise, however you say that, right? Who won the race? The turtle, right? Even though the tortoise, okay, won the race because he was consistent. And unfortunately, this is really how cancer survives in the body. So, in our treatment intervention, in our approach to our lifestyle changes, in what we're doing, right? Even if it's a traditional approach, we have to be consistent. Sometimes I think in our sleep presentation we said we want to sleep in until 2 o'clock in next day. No, you have to be consistent. Why? Because that disease is also persistent. All right? So that's a little bit about how cancer grows. Now, let's define some of these terms. I'm sure you've heard of malignant tumors. Well, all cancers are malignant, so cancerous tumors are malignant. This means that they can spread into or invade the nearby tissue. And you have here in the caption an example of what malignancy looks like. I like this picture because it shows you there the initial mutation. You see that cell there with around the normal cells. Something goes wrong, and so it's discolored in that section there. And then it begins to multiply, right? It does not respect its neighbors and it begins to take over more and more territory until it gets way down on this, am I on the right side? Yeah, this side of the screen, where you have now an invasive type of cancer that can even spread through the vascular system. And then we call it what? Metastatic cancer, right? So that's when the cancer cells can break off and travel to distant parts of the body. Here you have an example of the primary site in the colon, and then over time, as that tumor develops and grows, it travels through the lymphatic system and the circulatory and the lymphatic system, and goes to either the liver or the lungs, or really lots of different parts in the body. And actually, this is how we can differentiate the different stages of cancer. So this picture is really great because it shows you stage 0, which you almost never hear about, right? Usually when somebody has cancer, you hear about stage 4, right, immediately. But there are several stages before that. Those initial stages 0 to 1, you see that the tumor is still in its local site, but invading some of that surrounding tissue. Stage 2 to 3, it's a little bit larger. But you see those blood vessels growing towards it, those lymphatic vessels and blood vessels. And then finally in stage 4, it's when it becomes metastatic cancer generally. So it's traveled to another organ of the body. You do have benign tumors. These are non-cancerous tumors. The most common benign tumor for females is actually fibroids, right? So it's not, you can see there, can you see the example? Yeah, malignant, this is the benign tumor and that's the malignant tumor. The benign tumor isn't invading surrounding tissue, but over years it actually begins to grow. And so it can also be a problem depending on the location. So in the example of fibroids, there are lots of different locations that fibroids can begin to grow in the uterus. But if it becomes too large, it can actually cause the reproductive system to have some dysfunction. What about in the brain, right? Or in the skull, like we have a picture here. If that tumor grows too large, well, you only have a certain amount of space in the skull, right? So if the tumor begins to press on the brain and also within the space of the skull, then you can also have some serious dysfunction associated with that, okay? So benign tumor is not something to be worried about necessarily, but something to keep your eye on as it grows slowly over the years. All right, so some characteristics here. Cancer cells, I like to say they're less special. Well, what that means is that they're less specialized. They don't have a distinct purpose and function. You even see that in the way that they're made. Here you have a couple different examples of different types of cells, muscle cells, blood cells, etc., etc. And they're so beautiful, right? They're made to fulfill a distinct purpose, a distinct function. Well, cancer cells do not have any purpose except to multiply, invade, and take over. They're completely selfish, right? And even when you look at them under a microscope, not like anybody would really be doing that in this right necessarily, but even when you look at it, it looks different. Look at the normal cells versus the cancer cell, right? So cancer cells are what? They ignore the signals that tell the cell what to do. They run red lights. So those major signals, we've been talking about the cell dividing or the cell dying, they ignore those signals. And we know that when we run over the stop sign, like in this picture, or we run through the red light, so when the traffic light turns color, what happens? We put ourselves in danger, right? So this is what the cancer cell does. It also, the cancer cells also have the power of influence. They can influence normal cells to feed the cancer. All right, so anything in your body that's growing, even if it's a tumor, needs oxygen and nutrients to survive, right? Just like every other organ in your body. Well, the cancer knows this. So it secretes or it releases these molecules or these chemicals that make new or attract new blood vessels towards it. And those blood vessels will give it all the life and nutrients that it needs. So this little thing is actually pretty intelligent. It knows how to survive in our system. It also hides from the immune system. It does this either by creating something like a fibrous capsule around itself, kind of like a mask. So it goes incognito, or there's a word that I could never remember, in disguise. So the immune system doesn't recognize it as an invader, as something that it should attack because it's masked. Cancer cells also produce immune suppressing hormones that keep the immune system from acting like it's supposed to. So the immune system is a system that we want to be active when we're dealing with disease, any disease. If it's diabetes, it's cancer, it's COVID, it's a virus, right? Whatever it is, we want the immune system to be fully functioning. But these cancer cells produce mixed signals that can suppress that response. The immune system, this is kind of interesting, can also attract populations of, does it say here? Yes, immune suppressing cells. So right now in Alabama, we have a lot of pollen, right? Seasonal allergies. So people are responding, right? They're getting these drastic responses to something that's usually normal. It's not necessarily harmful for the body. And so the immune system has these specialized cells that help to regulate that response. Well, guess what? The cancer cell attracts these types of suppressant immune cells to itself so that the immune system will be suppressed instead of coming forward to destroy it. All right? So we're giving you all of this just to say, listen, when you're attacking this, of course, we have lots of information, and you can call us. We've treated lots, and not only us, lots of other lifestyle centers have treated lots of cases of very severe cancers. And by the grace of God and with His help, we've had really good success. But you have to be faithful. That is the only way you can really have a tremendous breakthrough with cancer treatment. All right. So cancer, I'm going to go a little deeper here. I hope your brain is ready for me. Cancer is a genetic mutation. It's actually a genetic disease. We're talking about the cell and the mutation. Well, something goes wrong in the coding of the cell, and that's why cancer begins to develop. So it is a result of changes in the genes which control the functioning of the cell. 3 things: how it grows, how it divides, and how it dies. So we're talking about the DNA now, right? Some of these genetic changes can be inherited, as we know. Something can pass down from grandma to mom to someone else. But some of this can actually be developed in your life over time. And that's really what we want to focus on. Maybe Shanice said it, I'm not sure. But they say genetics load the gun and lifestyle pulls the trigger, right? So sometimes we can't always control how the gun is loaded, but we can decide if we pull the trigger, right? So that's what we kind of want to focus in on. And we see that when we just change one thing in the sentence, if you were thinking of your DNA and the codes within your DNA, these sentences are so similar, but they have a total different outcome. The original sentence is time to dream. If you just change one letter, you have tame to dream. You reverse the order, emit to dream, delete some letters, teto edrem. You insert a letter, tim et odrem, right? So it's like 99.9% the same, right? And this is what you see in cancer. The cancer mutation is almost the same as the normal cells. But when we mix up the information, when the coding is changed, we no longer have useful information. So the cell goes into dysfunction. All right, one more step deeper, okay? Hopefully you're with me. So we just talked about the DNA, and here you have these long strands of DNA. I say kind of like the curls of my hair, right? Within the cell. Now, along the DNA, you have these molecules that are attached along the side of it called or within the epigenome. Maybe you've heard this word before, epigenetics, as it relates to disease prevention. So these little tags are very, very important to regulate the way that the gene is expressed. Okay? So there are three different types. We're not going to talk about that because that's not really important. But what you could think about, what you can relate this to is on and off switches in the gene. So you have the DNA strands that go on and on and on forever. And then you have these little on and off switches that tell the genes or tell the body when to be expressed. I mean, if you think about it, within an 8-year-old boy, right, there is the gene to grow a beard. But do you want that to be expressed at 8 years old? No, right. You want it to be expressed at the right time. So epigenetics has a huge part to play in, well, we'll talk about it soon. We're getting ahead, right? Okay, so if you were, just to give you an example of what this is, if you were to take all the letters within one DNA strand of one cell, one DNA strand, one cell, and put it on a piece of paper back and forth, all of that information would stack up to a 300-foot pile of paper. That's one cell, one DNA strand. So there's tons of information, a lot of information for the body to read, but the epigenetic coding will help it to be expressed in the right way. Does that make sense? What we're saying there, and we're gonna talk about what is the most powerful physical factor to positively affect the epigenetics. So epigenetics is the study of gene expression not changing or resulting from a change in the DNA sequence. So you're not changing the sentence, but somehow the expression is changed. Most importantly, which is what we want to focus on, the key defense genes that protect the cell from cancer formation is turned off. So when those tags, and here you have another picture of it, the DNA kind of around those strands, and then the epigenetics or the epigenome is represented by those flags. When they're incorrectly placed, genes that should be suppressed are activated, and genes that should be upregulated are suppressed. All right, so we want to make sure that that stays in place, and we're going to tell you how you can do that. Is anybody timing me? Where have we been? No, okay, 40 minutes. Can be. Oh, wow. Okay, so we're going to move ahead here. Okay, let's jump to some of this genetics. Okay, here are some of the types of genes that turn on and off by our diet. Here we go. All right, so let's look at the cancer risks in the U.S. So for males, let me just jump to my notes here. We're doing this fancy two-computer thing. All right, so in males in the U.S., you are 43.31%. You have that percentage risk of developing cancer, which is 1 in every 2. And from dying from cancer, 22.83%. Females, it's a little bit lower, 37 point something percent. That's 1 in every 3 of developing cancer. And then risk of dying, 19.26%. The older you are, and this is just factual, okay, don't get me. The older you are, the more at risk you are as well of developing cancer, because we understand that cancer is a genetic mutation. So your DNA has just been around longer, and it has been exposed to more things over a longer period of time. So it is at a higher risk of developing into something that is potentially cancerous. And we see this at our center a lot. A lot of times we do have young people who come in, younger meaning 20s and 30s, or even younger sometimes with cancer. But a lot of our guests are older, above the age of 65, and are now having some cancer development. So 50 to 59, 1 in every 20. 60 to 69, 1 in 10, 70 to 79, oh, there we go, 1 in 5, and then 80 to 89, 1 in 3, right? Chances of developing cancer. So this is a growing problem in the US. And as I began by saying all of us have been affected one way or the other by this. This morning, I think it was in one of the presentations, maybe Jai's, we learned that what has been for maybe over 100 years, what has been the number one cause of death in the US? It's been cardiovascular disease. But in 2002, two states outdid cardiovascular disease. In 2014, 22 states outdid cardiovascular disease as cancer as the number one cause of death. So now the scientific community is taking a look. They're saying, I wonder when cancer will become the number one cause of disease. And as we look at what can cause cancer, we will see why this is such a prevalent disease. We're going to jump through some of this. Okay, so what are some of the risk factors for developing cancer? Age, we talked about already. You know, the older you are, the more at risk you are. But really, I think a lot of that has to do with your lifestyle as you get older, right? Okay, alcohol, we'll talk about all of these in more specific, like more detail. Cancer-causing substances. There were so many cancer-causing substances when we were putting together this presentation that's all I had to just put it in a bracket there. One sentence, cancer-causing substances. I think everybody kind of touched on this. Shanice talked about reading your labels, right, as you go to the grocery store. What about the things that we put on our body? I always talk about this because as females, we have a whole plan, right? Your hair has one set of products, your clothes have another, perfume is face product, right? You have all these different things. And not that you listen, by all means, look nice, smell nice, do your thing, but you want to really make sure that you're reading what is in your products, you know? You may not have the effect right now, but as you get older, for some of us as younger women who want to have children in the future, things like that, you have to really be careful as to, what can some of these substances be doing to my body. Chronic inflammation, I'll run through this. Diet. Oh, there was this powerful study done here. So we know that flesh food versus a plant-based approach can increase your risk of cancer, but what about how much times you eat? Well, some studies tell us that you can increase your risk of colon and rectal cancer by 90% for those who eat 4 or more meals compared to those who eat 3 or fewer every day. So it's not just about what you eat, but it's about how much you eat, right? Or I guess how often you eat. Okay, hormones, yeah, like your hormone replacement therapy or birth control, things like that. Immunosuppressive drugs or anything that suppresses your immune system, certain types of viruses, obesity, radiation, right? I'll just let that set in because that is a conventional way to treat cancer, and sometimes you do see some reversal, right? Remission. And then sometimes you find a relapse, right? So it may have taken care of the cancer in this area, but then in a year from now, you see 2, 3 different types of cancers, right? And honestly, this can happen in a lot of different treatment approaches, right? But we want to know what is God's plan for us, right? You and the Lord have to make this decision together. Sunlight, we learned this morning, the key is not to be burnt. We'll talk about that too in more detail. And then tobacco. Tobacco used to be the number one cause of death worldwide, not because of not based on a disease that a person has, but because of a behavior that a person has. And you know what it is now? Number one cause of disease, a behavior, it's poor diet. All right, worldwide. So there are lots of different conventional treatments. The one that we're most familiar with, radiation, surgery, and chemotherapy. But there are also some interesting targeted drug therapies, and we don't have time to talk about them, But you can actually have some pretty amazing stories of recovery from this specific side here, this targeted drug therapies. But today we want to show you what you can go home and do. So we're not going to focus on that. Okay? Just this one more point here before we talk about jumping into nutrition. So, how much cancer cells do I need to have in my body before it can be detected, right? When you go to the doctor, you do your MRI, your mammogram, all of those CT scans. This is just so, I wish I had more time to talk about it, but a great graph here. Down below, you have the size of the tumor, right? And then up on this side here, you have the rate that it's growing. So 10 to the 0 power is 1 cancer cell. Of that, 1 becomes 2, 2 becomes 4, 4, 8, 8, 16, right? So it doubles in size. When it gets to 1,000 cancer cells, it's now the size of 1 microgram. That's the sign there for microgram. When that doubles, now it's 1 million cancer cells, up by that 20. It's the size of 1 milligram. And you know what a milligram is. Lots of you have your tablets at home, right? It's like a small amount. But that's 1 million cancer cells. And guess what? You still cannot detect it on any imaging whatsoever. At that point, you see there's some neovascularization, which means that those blood vessels are now beginning to grow towards the tumor, which we don't want to happen, but that's still happening there. And it's not until it gets to 1 billion cancer cells can we now pick it up on our scans, our MRI, CT scan, mammograms, etc. Again, kind of just getting that point home to your mind that we have to be consistent in our treatment approach. We have to be consistent and faithful in these principles. So sometimes we do treatment, radiation, chemotherapy, even natural hydrotherapy and so on, and we have remission. So we go to the doctor and the doctor say, you're cancer free, right? So we have some remission. You know what? If it's a question, can we take it at the end?
Sure.
Okay. All right. So we have remission, but you can be in remission and still have about how much? 1 million cancer cells present, right? And then it grows, the tumor grows, and then it gets above that 1 billion line and you have relapse, right? So again, we just have to be really consistent. Here's another example of it in the case of leukemia. And you see that there's a dip, a great, whatever treatment was used here, you had a lovely remission, but then over a period of time, this is almost, a year, 2 years, then it gets back above that detection line and you have a relapse, right? So we want to make sure that we are consistent in our treatment approach. All right, how many more minutes do we have? Tell me. You doing good? Do you need to stand? Or we can rush on. 16 minutes. Okay. All right. We're going to go ahead. Is that okay? Okay. So, remember we were talking about the epigenome? Nutrition is the strongest physical factor to affect the epigenome. If you want to know how to turn on and off the right genes, diet, nutrition is the best way to do this. I think it was Shanice just talked about Dean Ornish, an incredible study. He's done lots of research in lifestyle intervention, studying low-grade prostate cancer, and he put these patients on a 3-month lifestyle modification plan. All right, he did some things: stress management, diet, of course, plant-based, low-fat, moderate exercise, and then a support group. The prostate or the prostate cancer was biopsied, and before and after, and we saw that there was significant decrease in the activity of the cancer-associated genes. So not just the tumor growth, because this is low-grade prostate cancer, so it's not gonna you're not going to see such a great decrease in just 3 months. But remember those genes. So those cancer-associated genes here you have, in simply put, red means more activity in those genes. green, well, the second picture, it's showing us that there's less activity just from what? Diet, what was it? Diet, exercise, stress management, and a support group, okay? So nutrition, excellent approach to disease prevention. Fruits and vegetables, we already know, protect against several different types of cancers, cancers of the mouth, throat, voice box, esophagus, stomach, lungs, etc., etc. We have all the references on the screen because, as you can tell, we're running through the information, and you can look at that some of that information after. Phytochemicals, right? They help to regulate hormones that promote cancer growth. They slow the growth of cancer. They reduce inflammation, and also they reduce oxidative damage. And oxidative damage is the exact thing that we want to prevent, right? You hear a lot. Everything in your supermarket now is marked with antioxidants, right? Because you want to decrease oxidative damage. But the best way to get all the antioxidants that you need is from your fruits and vegetables. So let's talk about this in some more detail. What types of fruits and vegetables specifically? Well, we have the cruciferous family. What's that? What's in your cruciferous? Broccoli, that's probably the one that people know the most. Kale, cabbage, cauliflower, Brussels sprouts, bok choy, kale, etc. Here's the list of cancers that this particular vegetable can be helpful in the treatment of. All right, they help to regulate body enzymes that defend against cancer. Again, so many great things there. That's also talking about the DNA level and those enzymes that actually prevent the cancer from mutating. These cruciferous vegetables can help with that, and they can help to stop the cancer cells from growing. What about lycopene? This is one that everybody kind of knows, right? Lycopene in the treatment of what type of cancer? Prostate cancer, yes, can be found in tomatoes, pink grapefruit, watermelon, apricots, etc. They can also be used for lung, stomach, prostate, colon, mouth, esophagus, etc. cancer. But what about the lycopene supplement? What do you think? Well, there is this interesting study done by Harvard Health. It was a large population study, which means that they're studying several hundred people, lots of people over a long period of time, usually about 8 to 10 years. And this specific study was looking at dietary intervention and how it can decrease cancer formation. So what they recognize is that people who increase their intake of tomatoes, even in pasta sauce or pizza sauce and so on, decrease their risk of prostate cancer. So the wonderful researchers, they said, I wonder what it is that's causing this reduction. Well, it must be lycopene. So let's do this experiment where we divide into two different groups, one group being a lycopene supplement group and the other being a placebo, so a sugar pill group, right? They actually had to stop the study short, just about 2.5 years, because one group dramatically increased their risk of prostate cancer. What group do you think it was? It, it was actually the lycopene supplement group. Interestingly enough, please look at that. Yeah, if you're that link that's quoted up top there. So it's not just about getting, and see, this is the mentality that we do have to get away from. Sometimes when we're on this new journey, we take away the med and then we just add in a supplement, right? So the pill popping mentality. No, it's not just about getting the phytochemical, but it's about getting it in the perfect balance, the way that the Lord packaged it. All right. And now not everything is like that. We talked about vitamin D supplementation, and there's some other things that we do need to use from time to time. But we do have to kind of do a little bit of research, right? Before just, I put this one in here because I remember when my dad learned about this, he was just eating cans of tomatoes, right? I'm like, Dad, something must be wrong here, you know? So, all right. So lycopene. What about soy? Have you ever heard of soy being used for breast cancer or ovarian cancer? There's actually a lot of controversial literature out there as it relates to soy being used as a treatment intervention for these cancers. But when we review the literature, generally we see that soy can be helpful in the prevention of reproductive cancers, so cancers of the breast and ovary. And we can go into some of the science of that, but we don't have the time. Pretty much there are two different types of receptors, estrogen receptors, estrogen alpha and estrogen beta. Alpha will help the tumor to grow, the breast cancer tumor, the tumor in the breast to grow. Beta will suppress tumor growth. And so we see that soy is a predominant alpha receptor effect until you eat about 42 cups of it. Where's my 42 cups of soy, right? So in using your soy, number one, you first don't want to eat 42 cups of it, which we love tofu, right, niece? We eat a lot of it, but we can't eat 42 cups of it, but still, right? So temperance. We talked about temperance this morning, right? Making sure that we know how much, first of all, where this product is coming from, the more processed. I think niece also talked about that. Like your, Stephanie also always have like your texturized, what do you call those things? Yeah, TVP, texturized vegetable proteins, and all those nice big fancy words that I don't really know, right? And this is what happens as we become more plant-based. We take out meat and then we add all the fake meats, right? Well, we want to be really careful of some of those things. What about the allium family? Yes, that's like all those quercetin-rich foods, the garlic, onions, leeks, chives, scallions, etc. They inhibit mutagenesis, which is the mutation associated with DNA damage. They also modulate those enzymes that we talked about before. I love this, they looked for free radicals, or they scavenged for free radicals, and they can affect cell proliferation and growth. The study that's quoted above studied 9 different types of cancer cells and 25 different vegetables, and their effect on decreasing cancer growth but not affecting normal cells, right? So sometimes, like radiation can kill the cancer cell, but it can also affect normal cells surrounding it. So it's really important for us to see how this would pan out, right? These 25 vegetables. Well, in 8 of the 9 cancers, guess what was the number one food that helped to decrease cancer growth? Garlic. Good job. It was garlic. 8 of the 9 was garlic, and then the 9th it was the number 2 food. The number 1 was leeks, and that was for I believe it was kidney, the cancer of the kidney. Okay, so that's all the good stuff to add into your diet. I'm sure you have all of these things in your refrigerator. You can go and get it, add in all of these things. But what about some of this? I mean, you see this in every presentation that we've given today, literally, right? Some of these highly refined foods, what are they? They're good to the taste, but bad to the body, right? They look so good sometimes. They're so colorful, but not so good for you. All right, what about your meats? And we have here including fish. I'm from the Caribbean, and sometimes we don't think that fish is a meat. Yes, it's also in that category. What about the eggs and dairy here? What about is that a vegan cheese sandwich? Do you think? What vegan cheese looks like that? Maybe Daya. I don't even think Daya can look like that, right? All the fried foods. And you can fry a broccoli pretty good, right? So it's not just about frying your chicken, but you can make good foods harmful for the body. So what do all of these have in common? What do they have in common? High fats. Yeah. Right. They are all high in oxygen-free radicals, right? Amidst a list of other things. They're high in fat, high in sugar, all of that good stuff, right? So an oxygen-free radical is an unstable molecule that's missing an electron, and it goes to its neighbor and steals one from its neighbor to become stable. Well, then that neighbor does the same to its neighbor, right? And so you have oxidative stress, and this damages the DNA over time, causing cancer. How can we reverse this? By adding into our body the antioxidant. And this is actually not the greatest picture of an antioxidant, because the antioxidant has many electrons on its rings. And so it just willingly gives, like Christ willingly gives to us. It goes around the body looking for those unstable molecules and just gives an electron to stabilize or stop that effect. All right, so we want to make sure that we're eating lots of whole plant-based foods. We want to make sure that we're getting about 80% raw. This is specifically in cancer prevention. This is what we put our guest on: 80% raw, 20% cooked. And that 20% is actually important because some vegetables, when we cook them, we get a higher bioavailability of certain phytochemicals or nutrients, like carrots or even broccoli, right? So 80% raw, 20% cook, a variety of colors. This will, sometimes people ask, well, do I eat this for what vitamin for this, and what food for this vitamin, and what food for that vitamin? If you're eating a variety of colors within those groups, you're going to get everything you need, and then avoid all of the bad stuff that we talked about. All right, what about exercise? Yes, exercise can decrease your risk of developing cancer at any age. We said that as you get older, you're more at risk. But if you are active, here are some of the percentages. Amazing. I mean, up to reversing prostate cancer, which is a very common one for elderly males, up to about almost 75%. Right? So get active. What about surviving your cancer? Right? So you already have cancer. Well, women who walked between 8 to 6 hours per week decreased their risk of dying from breast cancer by about 43 to 50%. All right, so get walking. We talked about sunlight, so I'm not gonna I'm gonna focus on that. The major thing with skin cancers, and 2 minutes. The major thing with skin cancers, because you can have like malignant melanoma, right? Is to be careful of burning, and also being careful. This is so interesting. Okay, I'm just going to read this. Populations eating a high-fat diet and not taking in adequate amounts of dietary vitamins developed more cancers when exposed to sunlight. So we're seeing that it's not just about sunlight exposure, but it may have something to do with too much sunlight at the wrong time, so you're burning, and also the diet, right? The high-fat diet. And there's so much misinformation now out about sunlight because of malignant melanoma, which is a serious disease, right? That an aggressive type of cancer. But we have, on the other side of that spectrum, we have a host of diseases that's connected to vitamin D deficiency, from blood sugar control, weight management, degenerative diseases, so your Alzheimer's, your Parkinson's disease, all of this, because the average or the prominent levels of vitamin D in the US is about 20. Do you know where normal starts? 30. And to get some of these positive effects, you actually have to be way up closer to 60. All right? So you have to be temperate in all things. We know that we need the vitamin D. So how can we get it in? All right, let's see what else we need to talk about here. Of course, stay away from tobacco. Let's see. Going on here, alcohol use, yes, even for those who are in the beer making process. So beer that's made with hops. Hops is a phytoestrogen, right? And the more those estrogen receptors are stimulated in the wrong way, overly stimulated, you can develop breast cancer and so on. So even in the handling of the beer, those workers increase their risk of developing those types of cancers. All right, I'm going to jump to the herbs, right? Because that's kind of important. Here's a list of these toxins. What do you say? Spend time outside. Be careful of what you're putting in your body, right? Okay, last couple slides here. You're with me? Herbs. What herbs can we use? This comes from Dr. Agatha's handouts. Dr. Agatha and Calvin Thrash, they are the founders of our institution. And so some of these herbs are quoted and supplements and so on quoted from them. Number one is sweet wormwood. If you were sleeping for everything else I said and you just wanted to know one thing that you can use for cancer, this is one of the most powerful herbs. Several cancer lines showed significant improvement. I mean, some research is even being done where they're going to extract those properties in the wormwood and purify it and use it as a chemotherapeutic agent, right? So absolutely part of our protocol, sweet wormwood, or called in some stores, I have it written down somewhere here, Artemisia annua. Artemisia annua, thank you. Turmeric, we know that turmeric is what? A strong anti-inflammatory plant, herb, exactly. So used internally, used externally. We can give you more information on that. You have some of the stuff up there. At our center, we use about a teaspoon of it. Is that twice a day? Shanice, a teaspoon of it twice a day. She's working with the guest more these days, so I updated on the plans, all right? Turmeric, so 1 teaspoon at breakfast or lunch. Sometimes they put that in a little bit of milk, but incredible for cancer prevention or reversal, but really any disease, right? Because of the inflammation. What about red clover? Red clover is one of the safest herbs that you can use because there hasn't been ever known currently. I'm sure somebody has had a side effect to it, but as far as we know, you can take it and take it and take it. A great blood cleanser, but it also helps in disease prevention and cancer prevention. Making that into a tea or a tincture, things like that. Yes. If turmeric is good for pain, yes, it is because it's going to reduce inflammation. I'm so sorry. We'll get right to the questions. Yes, almost done. Okay. Black cumin. Also, you can get this in your, usually at Walmart and so on. We grind that up and we use, again, about a teaspoon of it. Is it black cumin? 1 teaspoon a day. We use that along with flaxseed and chia seeds, right? Flax seeds and chia seeds high in those omega-3s. So they have a similar profile. Can also be used to reduce inflammation and specifically cancer prevention. What about aloe? Pretty much, I say when in doubt, you can use aloe. Like aloe can be used for almost anything. The only thing you may not want to use aloe for is for like diarrhea because it causes, it stimulates, it has a laxative effect. But really a burn, sprain, any of those things, indigestion, you can use it on your hair, in the skin, and so on. For cancer, we use it in our cancer protocol. We use about a third of a cup to a third of a cup 3 times a day. It's about that. And so you can blend it with your, we take the gel, so we take the skin off and just use the gel inside and blend it either, like for diabetics, we can't use a sweetener, right? So we may use lemon juice or just the aloe and some water, right? And pray and drink. All right. Also, some mushrooms are used, and I don't know a whole lot about mushrooms, but Dr. Agatha, in her research, and also in her protocol, uses some mushrooms for a short period of time medicinally. 2 main types here for cancer, shiitake and maitake, and they do a great saute at the lifestyle center, and it tastes incredible. If you don't like the mushrooms, which lots of people, guess what? You can have the aloe, no problem. All right, and then finally to end here, our last slide here. We have this powerful hydrotherapy treatment called the hyperthermia bath. All right, Shanice covered the fomentation treatment. This is the hyperthermia bath. And what this treatment is doing simply, it's putting the body into a high temperature to make the cancer cells less stable. So cancer cells are more susceptible to heat. All right. So the strongest physical factor, external physical factor to actually stop cancer growth is heat. And you have lots, I mean, this is just a few of these studies that we've quoted above. You have some research centers in Europe doing these baths, even putting you under, so you're unconscious, and bringing your temperature up to a high level to actually stop some of that cancer growth, right? So we're not doing anything crazy like that. Not that it's crazy, but we're not doing anything that intense. That's a nice word. Right? We're only getting you up to maybe 100 101 to 102 degrees oral temperature with lots of ice on the head, because we want to make sure that the brain is safe, right, doing this treatment. And we actually see that those cancer cells at that in that hyperthermic condition, the cancer cells stop growing. So the tumor stops growing and even begins to die. All right, so we want to get the oral temperature up to about 102 degrees and hold it there for 20 minutes in a safe way. If you want more information on that, check our website, or we can talk after. And then we bring it back down. All right, so here is our little talk on cancer. And of course, when we get the diagnosis of cancer, it can also always be a worrying thing. Right? Naturally, it's a worrying thing, but we can trust in the Lord. He says natural means used in accordance with God's will brings about what? Supernatural results. We talk about superheroes and all they can do. Well, here are some superheroes. We just talked about them. Supernatural results. And the reality is that even if the Lord chooses that healing on this earth is not the solution, we can still completely trust in Him, which is the first step in our disease prevention. All right, we'll stop right there. Any questions? Yes, my dear, up top.
I'm sorry, I have 4 questions,
Oh,
so I
4.
don't know if I should be first.
Okay, yeah, I mean, if anybody else has. I think, go ahead, yeah.
Okay, maybe 5. I just wanted to ask about the allium vegetables. Will they still scavenge free radicals and affect cell proliferation and growth if they're eaten cooked?
So for our treatment, it's raw. I'm sure there's some benefit to the cooked as well. But usually, when do you put in your onions and garlic? When cooking. It's first. It's your saute stage. So in that water or oil, whatever, you can really kill some of that. So one of the recipes that we use for cancer prevention is actually a half of onion, and I think it's like 7 cloves of garlic. And to contradict the burning effect, we put like a whole lemon in there. And so it's raw, pretty much. Yeah, nice and potent for you.
Related to that, the lycopene in tomatoes, do you have to have the tomato cooked to activate that lycopene?
So according to the Harvard study, even in some of your tomato paste, your pizza, pasta sauce, and so on, they saw a reduction. It was just the element of the supplementation that increases the risk. So according to the Harvard study, but of course, the closer you get to the ground, the better it is for the body.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So 3 more questions.
Yes, no problem. And if anybody has a comment over here, please.
So would you recommend, there's suggested cancer screenings at various ages, mammogram at 40, such and such PSAs at whatever age, occult blood tests, whatever, at whatever age. Do you think that it's valuable to do those recommended screenings? Or what is your thoughts on that?
Mm-hmm. It's a great question. And we get this quite a lot. So it probably depends on the type of intervention that you're using. So the mammogram versus a blood test or a pap smear, right? And so we need to be wise in our approach. We don't want to say we're going to close our eyes. We're only using the natural stuff, and maybe my mom has had cancer, right? Inherited things, and we're not going to use some of these diagnostic tools. We have to be smart in the way that we're approaching this. Maybe we can talk together after on the specifics of what Uchee Pines recommends for some of those. But the general answer is that you need some guidance on which one will be safe for your situation.
Can you treat someone who has already been treated for prostate cancer by conventional methods and has had it come back, are you still able to work with someone in that situation?
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, I don't know. I've never worked with, because we work with the females, but we've had, so in specific, maybe is Jai here? No, okay. But we've had, so I don't know if I'm answering the specific about the prostate cancer, but many of our guests who come, unfortunately, this information is not well known. Right? So you go to your doctor, you find out you have cancer, and so the first thing you do is the conventional approach, and there is a lot of times remission, sometimes remission, and then a long time later you have an aggressive relapse. And that's, I think, probably maybe 75% of the time what we're using natural means to treat. That's what we see most of the time, and praise the Lord, these things still work. Now, of course, we don't say the Lord decides, right? We don't give 100% miracle, but yes, um, praise the Lord for that. Yeah. Okay. And I think she had a comment, and then you can ask.
For the last question, many of the people that come to Uchee Pines, they tend to come when it's when the doctors have given up, or when people tell them there's nothing else we can do for you. So to be honest, I think a lot of our guest care is more when their cancer might have came back, or they don't know what else to do. The chemo is not working, so a lot of times it might be end stage. And it's amazing how we meet people that's like, I had cancer 20 years ago and I'm doing a lot better. And then in regards to the some of the screening, the diagnostics, what Ricky was saying was true. Like, you have to be wise. We're not saying not to do your diagnostic studies. You need to follow up with your doctor, do your PSA test, your blood testing and stuff. With the mammogram, sometimes it could be a little touchy, because you know what they do in the mammogram, right? They put the breast tissue, they smash it down. And I don't think, if you were to do it all the time, it might not be the best if you had active, cancer, and you smash, smash, smash. So if you needed to have it done, you have it done. But then, is there other ways? Like, you can do it with physical exam. Find out from your doctor, is there another testing I can do, or is this the only way? Don't just stick with just one thing. Try to see what other testing, what is what is the least invasive testing I can do. But we do encourage you to get your testing, because it's kind of like, you don't want to just be shooting in the dark. You want to know, like Rukia was saying, many times we kind of shy away. It's like, I don't want to do this. I don't want to go the conventional route. But it's just like, I need to know what I'm dealing with. And then I can make the decision as to whether I want to go the natural route or if I want to go the conventional route. So, yeah.
You had another one?
Yes, I'm
Yes.
sorry.
No, please. This is good.
Apologies to the audience. They know me. So I have a neighbor that he was in remission from some sort of cancer. I don't know him well enough, so I don't know what kind. I suspect either colon or prostate, just based on risks and demographics. And I can tell that he's not aware of like lifestyle. Him and his wife are talking to me about clam chowder and sausage with whatever it is. Anyways, so if I bring this up and I say, hey, have you ever considered like natural methods to look at your cancer, to address your cancer? If he were to say yes, I would be willing to consider that. Then what do I do with that?
Give him our number. Yeah, I mean, well, I know you took lots of notes, lots of what we mentioned today, but I'm not sure if that. So you're asking what's the next step?
Yeah, like planting a seed. I don't know how aggressive to be with these folks.
Yes.
Because I don't know them that well. I'm just developing a relationship with them. We buy some of their eggs to give to some of my relatives who eat eggs all the time.
Yeah.
So I don't want to be overly aggressive, but I also don't want to be like, hi, I know something and I'm not sharing it with you. Have a nice day. Die from your cancer.
Right. Oh, yeah. I mean, Right. So it's always interesting to know how to approach that topic. Even for us who've worked in this for years and years, we've worked with literally so many patients, but you don't want to just say, "I know what can help you," right? Because sometimes they can be a little bit closed to that. But honestly, a lot of times testimonies can help. And maybe we can have some insight on this side if you have any suggestions. But yeah, sometimes it's just a testimonial of someone you may have known, or maybe something as simple as something you have tried in your life that helped, and you're making a suggestion, or someone who did have reversal from cancer, right? From using some of these natural things. I feel like people, the proof is in the pudding type of thing. And just, I know we're laughing about our number and website, but on our website we have several videos of people who've done treatments, at our center and so on, for different types of conditions, cancer included, and it's always been very encouraging, and kind of helps you to get your foot off the ground. Also, we have free consultations. I don't know if I mentioned that before, but we have health consultants who've been at Uchee Pines for almost 25 years, and they're free to talk to. You can call up and ask them gazillions of your questions before actually coming in as a guest.
Have you all brought any pamphlets or anything?
We do. We have lots of great info, and we also will be selling some things tomorrow, but we have some free stuff as well to give away. Do you have anything to share, Jai, about anything? No. I saw you come in kind of. No. Okay. All right. Any other questions? Thank you so much for being here. Yeah. Okay. Go ahead. Yeah, okay. Yes. Go ahead. Okay. Mm-hmm.